They sat me at the kitchen table. It was a small round table pushed into a corner by the back door, with a thin paper placemat and a plastic cup, the kind you use at buffets for children, and for a moment the image of the whole day was compressed into that cup. I smiled, kept quiet, and felt the warmth behind my ribs harden into something that would not be spoken for a long time. I had paid for the venue deposit, the linen, the band, the flowers, and the extra hours the staff worked to make the reception look effortless. My name did not appear in the program. My seat did not appear on the photographs. I promised myself I would tell the story of what happened that day, and I promised that what I did next would be deliberate, not an accident. If this resonates with you, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. The smell of hot frying oil and sugar from the kitchen drifted into the dining room, a sour undercurrent that stuck to my throat. In the hall, they laughed and took pictures, their perfume sweet and almond-like cake frosting, while I felt the scrape of worn wood beneath my palms and the coolness of a metal chair leg under the table. The guests poured in, dresses bright as confetti, smiles practiced and soft. Marco, the wedding planner, came by with a stack of napkins and said, "We put you where we can keep service smooth," and his voice had the calm of someone who had practiced small cruelties into the flow of the evening. I nodded. Daniel, the band leader, winked from the stage and said, "We will play extra slow for the mother of the groom," and no one thought to include me in that line. Rosa, the florist, brushed by carrying a tray of centerpieces and murmured, "We left a chair in the kitchen with the extra bouquet," and I watched the bouquet go by like a film of motion without color. Tom, the hotel manager, touched my shoulder and said, "We handled it, Miss Alvarez. You did a wonderful job supporting Ethan." And the phrase landed like a coin in a bowl I did not want to feed. There were at least 8 people who said something to me in that first hour. Short sentences, small motions, all exchanges that suggested care without recognition. "Are you comfortable?" asked Priya, a longtime friend, with the precise softness of someone passing a hand over a fragile object. "Do you need water?" Marco asked. "You look tired," Daniel told me. "Do you want to meet the bride?" Anna from the catering team asked, then hesitated. "He asked for just family photos later," Tom added. "We set up a private table," Rosa said, like a cover note. "We will make sure no one is bothered," Marco finished. The social air was a blend of laughter, silverware clinking, a low hum of the band tuning, the scrape of chairs, the fizz of open bottles, and the distant pop of a camera flash. My fingers traced the edge of the tablecloth. The texture was coarse, slightly damp from a spill earlier, and the placemat tasted like paper memory when I lifted it to smell the ink. My body gave the outward language of calm, while my mind stacked receipts like small grievances. I tried to contain myself with reasoning. I told myself this was about optics, that someone would later explain the seating as a matter of flow, that Ethan was nervous, that Lucy, his bride, had asked for a seat near the service entrance because of a family legend of hospitality. I imagined excuses and stacked them. The venue required a certain layout. A family member with mobility issues sat at the head table. The photographer advised that aisles be clear. I rationalized until my hands shook and the hum in my ears became a rhythm I could measure. I remember my childhood kitchen, a tiny apartment where my mother would set out plates on a battered table and call us to eat no matter who had visited. I remember saving from my first paycheck to pay for piano lessons for my son, giving up lunches and late-night movies, the quiet tally of small sacrifices. I remember writing checks under the fluorescent light at the dining room table, signing for deposits, for the band, a $12,300 deposit to reserve the ballroom, $4,500 for decor and flowers, $2,800 for catering, plus small payments to Daniel for an extra hour. Those numbers lived in a spreadsheet on my phone labeled Ethan Wedding. In my memory, the ledger is a kind of ledger of love and generosity. In the present, it felt like evidence left out in the open. I wrote in the margins of my memory the word receipt, the way it looks when a credit card terminal prints it in a thin, curling strip. I remembered lying awake nights counting change in the jar labeled future, the jars my father taught me to keep, the soft click of coins in winter. I was the one who believed in the project of Ethan's life enough to invest in it as if it were mine. My backstory is not a list of grand sacrifices, but a pattern of small commitments. I grew up in a house where promise was currency. My mother taught me to stretch a dollar and to hold a word like a plated gift. I paid for Ethan's after-school program with overtime shifts at the bakery, and I learned to fold late nights into mornings until my hands were calloused and my laughter had a quieter edge. I loved with practicality, with a ledger of acts instead of declarations. The sacrifice meant missing recitals sometimes, skipping a weekend away, choosing work when our family needed the money, and smiling at the boy who would become a man and tell him the world would be easier. Lately, I had become that person who said yes, who opened my wallet and found the receipts for everything, who typed emails to vendors and signed contracts because someone had to make sure the dates were real. That pattern is part tenderness, part stubbornness, and part a quiet hunger to be proud. I did not expect the kitchen. I did not expect the erasure. The first concrete evidence appeared that night in the form of digital traces. A group message on Ethan's phone resurfaced an image someone had sent earlier. A screenshot from a private chat that said, "His mom is handling the money so we can look like we did it all." The tone was light, a laughing emoji appended, as if to soften a theft. I found the message forwarded to me by Priya, who had copied it from a family thread where someone called the seating an aesthetic choice. There were transaction histories too, small line items that did not belong to wedding accounts. Charges labeled Flow Decor Deposit with reference numbers and a vendor name I had never authorized. The florist, Rosa, had an invoice showing $4,500 paid on June 2, with last four digits of my card number. But the memo line read, "Gift from Lucy." A payment confirmation from the band for $900 appeared with the note, "Added hour courtesy of the family." The ledger on my tablet showed my name, but also columns where my name had been struck through, replaced by family contribution. I printed a receipt, put it on the table where I sat in the kitchen, and watched as the paper looked absurdly fragile against a sea of champagne glasses and polished silver. The combination of screenshot and receipts made the humiliation concrete. I felt small and exposed, and then, with an odd clarity, calm. If you are watching and feeling that tightness under your ribs, I want to hear you. If you have ever been the invisible financier of someone else's story, type in the comments, "I was there too," and tell me where you are watching from and one sentence about what you paid for. Your words will help other people realize they are not alone. These moments lock you into a private shame unless you hand them over to a public bench and let others sit with you. There, in that small act, states can change. When you write, "I was there too," and say the city or town you are from, you make it easier for someone else to breathe. Share briefly. Keep it simple. Understand that when you publish your pain in that format, you join a line of people who take their stories out of the closet of quietness and into the sunlight of company. Now I will tell you exactly what I did next, not to glorify the move, but so you can see the exact pattern of how silence became a decision and how a quiet decision can shift power. I called 3 numbers. Each call was a small, cold performance of control. I dialed Marco first and said in a voice that kept the warmth in my throat, "Marco, this is Rosa Alvarez. Please stop the reception extra hour. I am withdrawing approval for overtime." He hesitated and replied, "Ms. Alvarez, the band and staff are scheduled." I answered, "Cancel the extra hour. Confirm with Tom." There was a pause and then, "Yes." Then I dialed Tom at the hotel and said, "Tom, please place a hold on the second-floor bar and refuse liquor service after midnight for the private suite." His voice, practiced and managerial, said, "I will make a note." I said, "Please confirm in writing." He said, "I will." Third, I called Daniel and said, 1 hour less. Do not extend past the agreed time." He said, "But the crowd is loving it." I replied, "Arrange your set accordingly and stop on the dot." Each call was short, each exchange deliberate, a rhythm of 3 strikes that were not loud but precise. My voice was measured, the words small, the effect catalytic. The calls did not create a scene, they created a pause. People noticed confusion. A text thread started. Why did they cut the last song? Someone recorded a clip asking, "Is the bride okay?" But the calls did not produce immediate vindication. They produced logistical irritation and a ripple that suggested someone in the background had a hand on the tiller. That night, I did not sleep. I went home and made tea I could not taste, the steam fogging my glasses like a memory I could not see through. I replayed scenes, Lucy greeting guests, Ethan laughing with old friends, the photographers capturing moments where I was deliberately out of frame. In a drawer with old tax forms, I found an envelope with my late husband's handwriting. The letter was unexpected, sealed in a way that suggested he had meant it for me in private. I sat at the kitchen counter and read the letter under a single lamp. His handwriting curved, familiar, calm, and contained a paragraph that stopped me. He wrote that the boy we raised as our son was not biologically ours in the strictest sense, that long ago there had been a truth he had promised to protect us from until he believed we were strong enough. He wrote that he had kept a legal document, a note he had hidden inside a small safety deposit box, that proved he had made decisions to secure Ethan's future as if Ethan were theirs wholly, and that he wanted me to know that my investment in Ethan was never merely financial, but an act of chosen parenthood. The letter did not rewrite the past, but it reframed it. This was not about blood, it was about legacies and choices. For the first time that night, the humiliation split and a different feeling entered. Recognition that my life had been anchored in love and that anchoring made me more than a guest or a line item. Reading the letter, I felt a clarity, a cold and clean truth that did not fix everything, but gave me a name for my rage and for my tenderness. The next day, I returned to the venue with a small, practical plan. I cleaned the small kitchen where they had sat me, folded that paper placemat, and put it in the top drawer with a sticky note that read, "Do not forget." I boxed up the mismatched flowers from the back table, put them in a brown paper bag, and left them on the doorstep of the shelter down the road. I called Rosa and said, "Thank you. Please redirect your flowers to the community center." She agreed and then, quietly, told me she had been waiting for me to say something. I spoke with Sarah, the neighbor who had driven me earlier, and she brought over bags and a casserole dish. I gave away the centerpieces to the elderly woman in apartment 3B, to Priya, who taught at the community center, and to the breakfast program that Tom had once recommended. Each small action felt like picking away at the edges of a bruise. People noticed. Marco sent a text asking for a meeting. Daniel left a voice message apologizing. Anna from catering delivered an extra thermos of soup and said, "You should not have been in the kitchen." Those small acknowledgments were not the same as restitution, but they widened a circle of care. My neighbor Sarah helped me paste a note beside the box of receipts, legacy, not receipt. I rebuilt my network by choice. A month after the wedding, I hosted a small dinner not for appearances, but for chosen family. I invited Priya, Sarah, Rosa, Anna, and Marco. I also invited Miguel, an old friend from my bookkeeping days who had taught me to inventory worth, and Jasmine, a nurse at the clinic who had once told me, "We are what we keep for each other." The table had no place cards. We ate roasted vegetables, rice, and a simple chicken that smelled of thyme and old Sunday afternoons. The playlist was quiet and the lighting soft. There were at least 8 exchanges across the table that mattered more than the official toasts at the wedding had been. "You did not deserve that," Priya said. "You did not deserve to be made small," Rosa added. Miguel asked, "Do you need help with the finances?" I answered, "I will need help to set boundaries." Jasmine said, "We will help." Marco said, "I learned something that night. I am sorry." Anna squeezed my hand and said, "You are more than a receipt." Then Ethan arrived, late, shirt untucked, face that familiar mixture of apology and entitlement, and we had a conversation I had rehearsed that morning. "Mom," he said, I replied, You did not mean to put me there. You did not mean to make a seating into a story of who matters. But intention does not erase impact," he stammered. "Lucy asked for it. She said it was easier." I said, "It was easier for her if you allowed it to be unseen that others paid for the set. It was easier for her if the hands that made it possible were not in the photos." Ethan tried to explain that they were trying to keep appearances for his in-laws, that Lucy was nervous about something. Lucy did not speak much. At one point, she said, "I am sorry," softly, like an afterthought. The exchange stretched, at least 9 moments of give and take that left neither of us exactly where we had started. But it opened a frame. I removed some photographs from a shelf and handed them to Marco to deliver back to the photographer with a note asking for proper credits. It was a symbolic gesture, and it felt like reclaiming a small corner of the narrative. 3 months later, I had an offer to lead a small workshop at the community center about household finance and boundary setting. I was nervous to speak publicly in that role, but I had moved from a private ledger to a public one, and the difference was teaching. I used extracts from my own receipts to show how invisible labor is often billed as love. I taught 10 people how to name contributions and how to ask for a written agreement when they sponsor events. 6 months after the wedding, I had turned the letter from my late husband into a small legal action that clarified guardianship notes and legacy wishes. The man who had erased my name in the program had offered to meet privately. He said he had not realized the full cost to me and wanted to find a way to make amends. I accepted a meeting under terms I set. I walked into it with a folder of printed receipts and the letter I had found. And I left with a check that covered the deposit and a quiet apology written into an email. It was not restitution for everything, but it was a step toward making the ledger add up in both hearts and accounts. If this story touched you, if you have been placed in the kitchen while someone else stood in the light, please subscribe to this channel. Here we share the raw versions of our lives and practical ways to move from being invisible to being acknowledged. I will post tools about how to document expenses, how to speak with vendors, and how to create simple legal records so your contributions cannot be politely erased. Click subscribe if you want more episodes like this, where we unpack the moment when humiliation is turned toward reconstruction. And if you have a similar story, begin your comment with, "I was there too," and tell me your town. Your short sentence will help someone else find courage to say theirs. For anyone who still doubts that small acts of silence matter, remember that the chair in the kitchen is not a verdict. It is a prompt. You can stand up, you can call, you can redirect the flowers, you can set a table of people who choose you. My final promise is simple. I will no longer let my name be an invisible line on a receipt. I am not the chair in the kitchen. I am the person who clears the table and chooses who sits there next time.